G'day everybody, Lee here with another pre-episode warning for people. Specifically, we go into some spoilers on a variety of different media, as well as dealing with topics that may be considered sensitive to various communities. So please be advised of that. Otherwise, enjoy the episode. Thank you very much. Hello and welcome to Peeves and Cues, the podcast with views about cues that peeve you. My name is Lee.
And I'm Anna.
And we have quite a fun episode lined up today. The poll didn't do as well as I expected, but we've had a lot going on. So let's get into that. How has your week, 2 weeks been since the last episode, Anna?
Yeah, actually, I'm quite pleased, which is kind of funny because last week was a disaster. Yeah, I'm enjoying myself, so it's all good. Flooded the house. Mum took a fall, got sick. Spent half an hour in a queue for a parking lot today for her first radiotherapy appointment. Had to kick her out into the rain. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just a mindset thing. But yeah, I'm still kind of, feel like it's been a good week regardless. Or maybe it's just because we were actually getting on with things when it started. But, yeah, definitely had some panic moment there when I managed to flood my bedroom from ensuite, as you know.
Yeah,
I was like, very good everything.
Yeah, I can imagine. That was...
Yeah.
Especially considering why. Finding that out was wow. Yeah.
Yeah. I wish I could say that I've taken faster showers since then. They're about approximate the same length of time. It's just that 75% of that time is now spent looking through my, shower screen doors to hopefully not find water on the floor.
Yeah.
I'm just like, yeah. Is it flooding? Is it flooding? Is it flooding?
That's one of those things where I wish Western bathrooms were like Japanese bathrooms, where the whole room is the shower. It's supposed to get wet.
Yeah, I mean, wet rooms are a thing. You'll normally only find them for things that have been either done in like hotels or for people who are disabled, though, generally in the West, I found.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why, like, Japan, the shower is where you wash and the bath is where you rinse.
Soak. Yeah.
And then, yeah, so I kind of like that idea, honestly. Personally, I think we should have that, which means, Japanese bathrooms are, I guess, sunk in a little bit.
Yeah.
From the rest of the building, the rest of the house or whatever, because, the whole room is full of water. But yeah, I feel like that's something we should probably start looking into for building houses from here on in the West.
But
that's just me.
Actually building them to standard and code.
Well,
and
yeah.
not just cutting corners and pouring concrete down pipes. Yeah.
Oof, yeah, okay.
Amongst other things.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the legal investigation's still going on, so we won't refer to any of that. Yeah, as for me, well, I lost my whole computer. I had a cascading hardware failure, and I lost everything. Anna already knows this, but that's how my week has been going for the last, week and just over a week now.
He even lost his body. It's a shame. Like today, I can't see Lee. He no longer has a physical body. He obviously had like a kind of hollow projection of himself, which is broken down because, all I saw him as was like a Minecraft level today. So
I am a manifestation in the ether. It's fine.
God, maybe there's actually only one voice on these podcasts and you're just in my head. Plot twist.
You have some incredible powers if the voice in your head can be heard by the other people listening to the podcast. Which, thank you very much to those people. You guys are amazing.
All three of them.
We have more than that, I think.
You're right. My mum downloads this on at least 18 devices.
I lost everything. I lost all my streaming assets. I lost a whole bunch of stuff that I cannot get back. So my last few days has been spent. Well, first I'm rebranding my stream, so there you go. That's going to be fun when it comes to the Twitter read at the end of the show. But also, yeah, it means that I have been able to pull the pin on that rebrand because I've had it in my head for a while. Because I wasn't really feeling the last identity, I guess. I kind of made it in a relatively dark period of my life, darker than usual anyway, and it didn't really kind of fit anymore. And it gave the wrong impression, I think. So yeah, I've done all that stuff, but yeah, setting up essentially a brand new computer, setting a new one up. I have to all the hardware, all the programs, all the files. I'm sure there's stuff I'm still missing, but I got all the important stuff in, and my last few days has been spent just creating art assets. I had to recreate the logo for the podcast on the Twitter because I lost that, and all that information was wrong now. So I had to recreate that, which frankly it looks better now. But yeah, I had to recreate that to pull that stuff together. Luckily it wasn't difficult, just time consuming.
Yeah.
So yeah, the hardware failure happened ironically on a day I was literally going, today's the day I need to do some backups because my computer's running a bit funny. Yeah, I'm going to do the usual nuke and reinstall.
Yeah.
I was going to do all this stuff anyway, but I was going to back stuff up first so I didn't have so much work to do. But my computer decided, you know what? No, you're doing it now, and we're skipping the backup step. So that was fun. And also, my town's in lockdown for a week after 3 people, I said 2, but it's now actually 3 people tested positive to COVID.
So,
well,
next time you tell me this story, it'll be like 5 people, and each time you'll get slightly less annoyed that you're in lockdown. And you're like, okay, there's 21 people with COVID. It's fair now.
I mean, the thing is, it was 3 people originally that were detected. I said 2, but it was 3.
Yeah.
But it was because they travelled up from Sydney. Hey, remember when Sydney was supposed to be locked down? Yeah, no, nobody locked down.
Yeah.
But this town did, because 3 people happened to have it, and they were immediately caught and isolated, but the town is still locked down for 3 days. Which is good. It's fantastic. But you know what people do when they go into lockdowns and they have no idea? They panic buy. So I'm looking forward to groceries this week. Or should I say, not getting any.
You're looking forward to like a wilted head of lettuce and, a bag of dry pasta.
Pretty much. I'm going to be starving for the next 2 weeks because idiots panic buy when there's no reason to. Every single time. And I hate it. But on that note, tangentially related, which is what we're good at, this week's poll was about zombies in the media. Yeah, this one was... We didn't get a whole lot of responses from this one, but I wanted to talk about it anyway, specifically because it's a topic that always comes up every so often, in terms of fatigue and exhaustion to do with pop culture. There's too much of this and there's too much of that, and we need to take a breather from this and that. But zombies is one of those things that's always kind of ever present. It never really goes away. It's always this undercurrent of media to do with zombies.
The undead can never die.
Exactly. The whole zombie topic is pretty much a zombie. It never goes away. It never dies. But yeah, I wanted to discuss this, not specifically because it's come back up with the release of a beta of a relatively anticipated game, but also because I don't know that much about zombies and how they came about, kind of in the media, I should say. So we pulled out the poll and we got 6 responses. The poll was essentially zombies in popular media. Are they overdone? Or, could we do with some more? And for the most part, 5 people said pretty much they're overdone. And 1 person said they wanted more. But we also got a few late responses that we didn't get into the poll. So we had another person that said they wanted more. Friend of the show, Chloe. Thank you very much. And yeah, I think for me it's a topic worth talking about because, I mean, if you follow me on Twitter, you know I'm fairly opinionated about a lot of stuff, whether it's, overplayed and bandwagons and all the rest of it. But I admit when I've made this poll and first kind of set the question, I was kind of on the side of, it's overdone, it's played. Can we move on to something else, please? But after doing this research for this episode, there's so much more to it, and what we've got, it's kind of lame in the grand scheme of things when you consider zombies and their history and the reasoning behind them. What we have is kind of banal.
Yeah, it's, I suppose, kind of from the point of view of shooting games, they're a safe enemy, really. It's like, oh, well, we can make them a bit of anybody and, can't say, well, you've made a game that's, racist or hating against this particular people unless they're trying to go for something with, like, historical accuracy. They're a bunch of, undead people, and they go in hordes, so you can have loads of them, so I suppose from that point of view, it's kind of, it's a bit of an easy cop-out for them, and, they can make odd little varieties. But yes, I'm curious to see if all the facts that we've read actually line up, so we're kind of going to be each other's fact-checkers today as well.
That's fine. But yeah, the thing I think it's, I don't know if anybody said this, it's just in my mind, but it's like, there's 2 safe targets for your first-person shooter games, or really anything to do with essentially mass killing of a humanoid. Zombies and Nazis. Those are the 2 pretty much safe bets that you can put into your media to have as a gory thing that you can chop to bits or kill. So yeah, it's
and
but
in the past, movies have gone, do you know what, let's go both, and have had a horde of zombie Nazis. It's actually a real movie. I should have remembered the name of it. But yes, it did come out around the time of World War II. So that's not surprising because Nazis were kind of involved with everything because they were the bad guys, so it was very easy. But yeah.
I mean, it's made its way into video games too, where the makers of Sniper Elite literally came out with Nazi zombies. There's a trilogy of those games now. Actually, there's 4 of them now. So it's literally you're fighting Nazis who are also zombies and skeletons and witches and ghosts, but it's mainly Nazi zombies. But not zombies in media or popular media, I guess, really kind of has its roots going way, way, way back. We're talking like 1600s. So Linda Troost did some research. In her book, The Undead 18th Century, she quotes that the undead, or zombies, first appeared in literature probably as far back as 1697, but were mostly described as spirits or ghosts rather than our, brains kind of thing. So that's some history that, I mean, I gotta be honest, my first thing about zombies was like Dawn of the Dead, or that kind of thing. But it goes back even further than that.
It does indeed. It has very old roots. Do you know where the term like zombie originated from? Did you come across that one in your research, and where the zombie phenomenon as such itself began?
Yes.
Yes.
It actually has it's got a very dark history in many different levels, but essentially it's from Haitian voodoo.
It is indeed.
And that is basically so Haiti way back when was a slave colony essentially. It was picking cane and African slaves were transported from Africa, bringing their beliefs to this new land and being used as slaves for hundreds of years. And it kind of adapted. The voodoo was essentially an African religion way back when. And the slaves brought it with them. And it kind of got amalgamated sort of essentially with Catholicism. And the Catholics from the French, who were the ones who brought the slaves to Haiti. Essentially it was originally... They were originally just soulless because of from the small research I did was because of the merging of African occultism and religion with Western religions and the way they did all that kind of stuff. For followers of the voodoo faith, it became one of those things where, much like Catholicism, you can't get to the promised land if you commit suicide.
Yep.
So for those who in Haiti who essentially the only way a slave could take control of their own lives when it got to the point, because some of these people would work to death, most of them in fact, the only way they had control over their own lives was literally to take it, to have that control over their own life. But if they did that, they couldn't get to the African promised land, which meant there was a very real, essentially, threat for them of becoming a zombie.
Yeah.
Which I believe in Haitian voodoo is Zombi. Zombie.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, that's some dark stuff. Like, the fact that they would wander Haiti as a soulless being forever trapped on the plantations.
Yeah, absolutely. They're, soul couldn't move on, but they're just mindless bodies, yeah.
So then Haiti got independence after a bloody and brutal slave uprising, which, absolutely had to happen. But zombies then moved on to being, not moved on, but the zombie myth kind of, or mythology or folklore moved into, because Haiti was quote unquote free, it wasn't, but it was essentially no longer a slave nation. There was no, I didn't look too far into it because I didn't really have the time, but suicide was no longer the way zombies were created. It came down to sorcerers, bakors, who were the people who would create basically dark black magic wizard kind of thing. The what you think of a voodoo cleric or voodoo wizard,
witch
or whatever.
Doctor.
To be crass about it essentially, but yeah.
Oh, some of them do refer to themselves actually as witch doctors. And the funny thing is, the one who attributed it to magical forces was actually European.
Yeah.
Shall we?
I think it was a Scotsman.
I can't remember exactly where he was from, but he actually came there and saw some, shall we say, real life examples of zombies. And this is where, and I'm not trying to malign a whole religion here, but because hoodoo and voodoo, which has its roots in hoodoo and voodoo are very different things. I know they sound similar. Obviously in curses and hexes.
Voodoo came from Africa. It was I think it was the source religion, and hoodoo became the Black African version of it, or African American version of it. So it was very different, but it has its roots in voodoo. So hoodoo is the localized kind of Haitian voodoo, Americanized version of voodoo. The base, I think, is voodoo. At least that's how I'm seeing it. But they are different, yes.
You're a young, aspiring, voodoo witch doctor. And you're telling everyone, I will curse your enemies. I will curse anyone who, doesn't believe in me and respect me and fear me and the power I have over the spirits. I'm not going to leave that to chance. I'm actually, one, going to be very good at psychology and manipulation of people. And two, I'm going to be really, really good with drugs. And
yeah.
Zombies, they would essentially, and one of the main drugs that they would use for zombification was tetrodotoxin, which you may know of, lots of people know from like pufferfish. And they would use it they would basically pick somebody they would zombify. And they would use tetrodotoxin to put them in a state which would mimic death, because it, obviously paralyzes you, it lowers your respiration and everything else. They would think they were dead and they would hold a funeral for them. And the witch doctor would then dig them up, take them back, use a bunch of other drugs. I can't remember the name of another one, but interestingly, it's also referred to as zombie cucumber. It begins with a D.
It's datura root.
It is indeed, thank you. And they would basically drug them and convince them and just completely gaslight these people into believing they were dead and were brought back by this person. And they would keep them drugged and subservient. So they had these servants who had no will of their own, who the community thought were dead. So, this person with the power over the spirits has brought our loved ones back from the dead, and they command them, and how scary is that? This was my husband, this was my lover, and they did something to earn the ire of this person. And I mean, that's a lot of fear, that even death wasn't a barrier from this person getting their revenge. Well,
it's especially insidious given the history of Haiti itself,
Yeah, it's almost having their own version of institutionalized slavery.
Well, that's the thing. They go from being a land oppressed by the white French to essentially someone of their own ilk, essentially creating a whole new brand of slaves.
Yeah.
They note that they are slaves in death as well as, if they weren't in life, they cannot escape it.
Yeah, and even in the law, it was the dead person, because they were told they were dead, could not escape until their master died. And then they were just kind of left to roam and do as they will do, basically. But even the early zombie movies, zombies weren't dead. They were zombified by people, It wasn't like the dead cat, it was done to them. And all the very early zombie movies, in fact, Bela Lugosi, the world's most famous Dracula, was in one of the very first zombie movies, and he was the evil, zombie lord who was raising these zombies, So it wasn't kind of sprung fully formed with our, brain-eating hordes at all. No, it's, like you said, there's a whole evolution which is tied to our evolution of fear as a society.
But that I mean, we might have a whole episode of this. In fact, I might do that, because we have a potential friend of the show, Kat, who runs the TGIF horror podcast.
Really?
We might have her on to discuss some history of things, because we have this thing. Just want to touch on this for a second. When it comes to this zombie thing and the way it's essentially metamorphosed into its own kind of genre over the years. Bear in mind, it wasn't that long ago that we had the I was going to say Haitian problem, but the problems in Haiti, where Haiti was a slave hub, a slave colony. It wasn't all that long ago. And it also wasn't all that long ago that we essentially gave slaves the freedom. like sociologically speaking, we didn't give them a vote until the 1960s. Like, that's some messed up stuff. But when you think about it, it's just another, like, the way we have taken what is essentially somebody's folklore and belief and turned it into entertainment value. And I mean, I'm not saying it should be off limits, but I don't think there are many people who truly understand or know, like I didn't, that that's where this comes from. That it is coming from somebody else's very fervently held beliefs.
Yeah, it's cultural appropriation really wasn't a phrase that existed around the time this happened.
Yeah, and it absolutely is. That's exactly what zombies are, and I'll say it now. I mean, the concept, not zombies as they are now, because they don't resemble anything like Haitian voodoo zombies. But the ones they are now, they came from that. So it's one of those things where you just kind of have to. I think this at least has taught me, and doing this podcast has taught me, but this especially has taught me that there's a lot more that we should be aware of when it comes to our media. I think we should be doing a lot more research into where our media comes from and who it may in fact be stepping on.
Though we have, all our main horror tropes, we've got the vampires, the werewolves, and they may have been, have roots in folklores of various regions, but like I said, there's not the take on religion that, zombieism has. Like I said, the original pure form of zombieism. And it's quite funny because what people consider one of the seminal zombie movies by George Romero, the very first one that he did.
Night of the Living Dead in 1968.
Yes.
Actually, gonna say I haven't seen it, but I have heard it's one of the best kind of modern zombie movies. And we'll talk about that as well. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I was just...
Yeah, I was gonna say, and one I actually got one confused with two, as that's been straightened up. They weren't referred to as zombies in the first movie, and actually,
no, they weren't.
There was a huge conflation, and it's funny that the whole point of zombies eating flesh seems to have come about from a complete and utter misunderstanding and accident.
Okay.
Because in the first zombie movie, they were referred to as ghouls. And ghouls actually have their basis in Islamic folklore. Although they're not actually part of the Quran or anything like that. They were a demon or humanoid monster that hung around graveyards and consumed flesh. So, ghouls eat flesh. Zombies are dead people, have no will. So they're all talking about these ghouls that are trying to attack them for those reasons, and everyone's like, zombies. I don't know how it came around that everyone equated it. Maybe because the second one, when they were called zombies.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think it's retroactive in terms of I don't know. Maybe someone who was alive in the 60s who saw it who might be listening to this and did see it. I don't know. But maybe when they came out of that movie, they were referring to them as ghouls, and then the second one came out and they were referred to as zombies, and then they kind of throughout the decades, it's retroactively been Romero makes zombie movies, because the second one, which I believe Night of the Living Dead 2 was a much bigger hit than the first one.
Yeah.
That's kind of essentially whitewashed or zombie washed, if we want to go that way, the first movie. So that now the first one, they're zombies. Even though in the movie they're called ghouls, we just think of Night of the Living Dead as that zombie movie.
I think, we're not close personal friends or anything, but considering how much Romero used those movies in social commentary in so many different ways, and in very different social commentary, I think it was a very definite choice. I think he wanted ghouls for the first one because he was talking about, you know, attacking and consuming to destroy this other and then being the other. Whereas the other one, you know, it was set against the background of there were massive race riots and, you know, the issue of colour and things is huge themes in the first one. I'm not going to give it away, like it got totally spoiled for me. Whereas the second one, which is everyone knows, is set in a shopping mall and had the very overtones of obviously the mindless hordes going through, you know, a shopping mall, which is not much different to any late night shopping we've seen, as the point was made. But it was a lot about consumerism in a lot of in-depth things. And I think he used those because he wanted that kind of mindlessness that was kind of the characteristic of the zombie. And that's the thing, you know, I was reading it and a lot of them were like solid psychology things. And they said the psychology of the zombies, they have no psychology, you know, they have no kind of will, no desire. There's just that function there. It's that intense mindlessness, you know, and I can see him going, no, I want these to be ghouls because, like I said, you know, ghouls were associated with eating human carrion to, you know, make it sound a little bit more acceptable. I don't know. Eating the flesh of the dead, obviously, because they hung around in that there, and some people decided, well, you know, eating other live people is probably more interesting. You know, but I think it was a conscious decision that he wanted them to be two separate entities, and then the fact that this conflation occurred, I think is super interesting. And then evolving into brains, which I think, I don't know where that came from, but I can very much understand that in the same way. You know, when you think of the zombie horde as an analogue for the mindless populace, you know, the blindly following, whether it's something like consumerism, or I'm sure people have talked about this today. And funnily enough, we don't refer to people as zombies these days. We refer to them as sheeple, people who are like sheep. But these are analogous things, you know, and I can very much see people thinking, well, this horde of zombies, these mindless people, what they want us to do is to not think and to not question. So they want to destroy our brains. They want to devour our brains to make us as mindless and as part of the horde of them. And I can see somebody thinking about that in you know, the terms of pop culture and thinking, wait, eating brains, this is great. And it's that kind of symbology that kind of they put into this art form. And like I said, I don't know how exactly it happened or who came up with it, but from that point of view, it's kind of genius, and I can see it happening.
Yeah, I have the answer, in fact.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's not definitive. It's just it's been posited as one thing, but I've got this article. I've got this article here where essentially the official, quote unquote, official explanation comes from Return of the Living Dead from 1985. The writer and director Dan O'Bannon. He suggested that the undead feed on the brains of the recent living because it somehow made them feel better by easing their pain.
Okay.
So essentially, they ate the living's brains because it made them feel better. Because zombies are an eternal pain. Obviously, they're rotting things falling apart. But yeah, it's essentially, to them, it was, they eat the brains to ease that pain because it makes them feel better. So that's basically about the closest we're ever going to get to, you know, why zombies eat brains. But apparently, yeah, that's where it started, was in Return of the Living Dead.
Yeah, because I don't know if you watched what what some people thought was like, you've got to be kidding, and trying to do the Twilight treatment to zombies, the movie Warm Bodies.
No, I haven't. I've heard about it. I've heard it's supposed to be good, but...
Yeah, a zombie boy falls in love with a human girl. And they're actually kind of... It's quite interesting how it's done, but they eat the brains because they kind of, through some process, which, you know, isn't really defined, but the magic of cinema, they absorb the memories of the person through the brain they eat. And more than the memories, they kind of get to feel that emotion, because as zombies, they don't feel anything. So it's a way for them to kind of remember feelings, because they just kind of are. And haha, that's kind of a joke because the guy's name is R in the movie. But yes, and zombies and feelings all have unintended consequences, and again, trying not to completely... Yeah, I am. I'm kind of going to spoil the film. He falls in love with this human girl, which may be due to the fact that he's just eaten her boyfriend's brain. And so kind of in the transference, he's like suddenly having these memory flashes of her, and obviously the boyfriend's feelings of affection. So in some kind of transference, he falls in love with her and kind of saves her life and things. But as he kind of continues this quote unquote relationship with her, and he starts to remember feelings and things himself, he actually starts coming back to life, and they equate feeling emotions with, you know, being alive, because emotions are a big part of who we are. And, you know, I suppose that's another kind of analogy towards being the undead. If you can't feel anything, are you really alive? You know, and it's quite interesting, but then that also leads all the, you know, questions of, well, if a zombie could come back to life, how do you equate that to somebody who was a normal human being, then was suddenly a vicious cannibal, and now a normal human being again? You know, how do you become okay with that? You know, it's kind of, not that we really, well, some subsections of the community do believe that it may happen, but, you know, the zombie apocalypse as a whole probably isn't going to come around anytime soon.
Well, the thing is, that's the other thing, right? So zombies, a lot of the monsters that we write stories and tell stories about, zombies, vampires, etc., they all, some psychologists theorize, come from that place of fear. Their ways of rationalizing our fears of what's in the dark, essentially, or keeping children in line to social graces and things. But as they lose that power, I guess, as we start to bring them more from folklore and more from a warning standpoint or a fear-motivated standpoint of protection and keeping us safe from the big bads, that's when we start to explore other parts to them. I think, you know, Romero was essentially, you know, using them as an analog for American exceptionalism and imperialism in the first one, and then, you know, in the second one for consumerism and the whole mindless consumption of anything and everything. To, you know, we've got shows or movies and things like, do you remember iZombie?
Yes. I do indeed.
This quirky little cute show from 2015 onwards to like 2019. It was like 4 years.
Actually based on a comic as well. Yeah. I didn't watch loads of it, but I watched a bit of it. Yeah.
I really liked that show. The first season. So the first season to me, we'll go into the. I'll continue my point. But the first season to me was one of those things where it was a show that almost didn't want you to watch it unless you were really like committed to it. Yeah. Like it was a show that was like so cheesy, and you watched it and was like, oh my god, this is actual cringe. Like you cringed to some of the lines and some of the things that were happening in that first couple of episodes. But the show kind of worked. So for those who don't know, iZombie was a show from 2015 to 2019. Starred Rose McIver. It was essentially about a woman who died and is now a zombie. And she has to eat brains to survive. Clearly, she's a zombie. But she retains a lot of her personal everything. She's basically a zombie in name only. But she becomes, through a whole series of things, she becomes hooked up with a medical examiner who feeds her brains from the recently dead, but she gets their memories, flashes of their memories, specifically how they died. And so she helps the police solve the murder. And it's a bunch of stuff. You told me about warm bodies and how, you know, the boyfriend or the boyfriend gets eaten by a zombie and that zombie falls in love with the dead man's girlfriend. That's essentially iZombie. You know, not to that extent, but it's more she eats the brains of a recently deceased person who has been murdered, and I don't know who did it, and she essentially takes on their memories and often facets of their personality.
Yeah, I remember an episode of the show, and it's like when they've franchised zombies basically, and they're like, you said you were going to get us an astronaut brain. I wanted to see what it was like being in the moon, you know, and yeah,
like zombies media existed in iZombie.
Yeah.
So, you know, but there were a whole bunch of it. Go watch it if you can. See if you can find it. You know,
CW was who originally produced it.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, and it's currently on Stan right now, apparently. But yeah, it's really good. But that's the thing, like that show explored the zombie potential essentially.
Yeah.
Like, what would it be like if a zombie did exist and still retained most of its faculties? But it still needed to eat brains. It was still technically dead for some reason. But you've also got, like, from iZombie, you go to shows like, what's it called? So good. I loved the show. It was Drew Barrymore, I think.
Santa Clarita?
Yes, Santa Clarita Diet, yes.
Yes.
That's the one. That's a really good show too. It's, I guess it's technically not zombies, it's more cannibalism, but also zombies.
Well, something happens to her that does make her zombies or something. I watched some of it, and it was just like a, you know, husband decides that we'll become basically a serial murderer to, you know, because his wife's a zombie now, and, you know, happy wife, happy life. Let's go kill the neighbours so you can eat an arm, you know. And,
well, to be fair, the show was... Okay, the first episode is hard to watch. It's the opening episode for Santa Clarita Diet. That first episode is the one most people watch to a certain point, and if you've watched it, you know the point, and then they decide whether or not the show's for them.
Yeah.
It's the gateway episode. If you can get past what happens in the first episode, the rest of the show will grab you and hold you for as long as you can, because it's really good. Seeing what happens to some of the characters in that show is just put such a big smile on my face, but you've got to get past the honestly very bad first episode. But it also explored, like, it took zombies and zombie related stuff in a different, like, direction. You know, these zombies aren't mindless.
Yeah.
They're not the ones we think of. So how would we react if that was the case, where this person is dead, this person is a zombie in a way that we think of zombies? They have no pulse, they're dead, but they're walking and for the high functioning zombie, I guess, talking and going about their day as normal. Yeah. They just happen to be dead. So you contrast that with things like AMC's The Walking Dead, where they're not even called dead, they're all zombies there. They're like, what is it, walkers?
Walkers, yeah. Yeah.
They can coexist. And I find that really interesting too, in terms of how human society can hold those essentially, it's the same genre, but they're different approaches to it, and explore different ways around it. Like, The Walking Dead explores humans, a small cluster of humans, and how they react to the fact that the rest of the world is out to eat them.
Yeah, and I saw a really good saying actually about The Walking Dead today, and it was kind of like they said, The Walking Dead is exploring the human condition, which happens to be set against a backdrop of like the zombie apocalypse. You know,
Yes,
it probably could have
yes.
been any kind of, you know, world-ending type disaster. I suppose it was just there so they could kind of keep giving back this imminent form of threat and reasons for them to keep shoving them along and into other things. But it's more really about how humanity would, you know, react. And there's a line in like I think it's the first season, and Rick, you know, the main protagonist that everyone follows, the cop, he's like, you know, we have to do whatever we survive. He's like, we're the Walking Dead. And it's like, well, hang on, is the Walking Dead meant to be referring to them as, you know, Mr.
It's only a matter of time.
Redneck kind of, you know, says, nah, we're not one of them, the zombies. What's his name? Norman Reedus?
Norman Reedus, yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember his name in the show.
Daryl!
You know, Daryl, thank you. You
Daryl!
know, or is it them kind of, you know, plodding on day by day, trying to survive, and sometimes it's like, well, why do we bother? You know, it's very much exploring the human condition and kind of how humans survive adversity, and also in a way how they kind of turn at each other. So although it's very much a zombie thing, it's almost more of, you know, they're used kind of as a plot device rather than
Yes.
it's there to be a zombie genre as such.
Yeah. Yeah, it's... I'll be honest, I haven't seen The Walking Dead because it was on cable.
Yeah.
I don't have a TV or have the ability to own cable, especially since they only sell it to you in packages. You can't just buy what you want. Yeah. But I have heard really good things about it, and obviously it's the collective social consciousness, at least here in the West. But that's the thing, like, The Walking Dead, I kind of equate The Walking Dead kind of to, do you remember the 2000 AD comics, specifically Judge Dredd?
Yes.
Yeah. So the thing about Judge Dredd that I think a lot of people kind of missed, at least if they weren't in that era, is much like The Walking Dead, Judge Dredd is just one set of stories in a background. It's essentially a giant shared universe of Mega City 1. And there's lots of different stories taking place in that universe.
Yeah.
So for Judge Dredd, Dredd isn't the protagonist of the story. He's not the main character. He never has been. He's just the viewpoint for us. It's the city, Mega City 1. Same with Mad Max. I will go to my grave. Mad Max is never, outside of the first one, in every other thing outside of the first one, he is not the main character.
Yeah.
He is the audience character.
Yeah.
He is us watching the story play out. He just happens to be in the middle of it. Everybody else is the main character. In Road Warrior, it's been a while, but it's somebody else. In Beyond Thunderdome, it's Tina Turner. In Fury Road, it's Furiosa. Mad Max, Max Rocketancy, is not the main character. People need to stop calling him main character. Yeah, he's the audience stand-in. He's the one we're supposed to travel with while the story plays out around us. Because he wants nothing to do with the stories playing out. He's just there. And I think that's the kind of thing they were going for with the AMC thing, is we are supposed to ride along with these characters. And, I mean, yes, they're kind of the main characters, but also the world is primarily the both protagonist and antagonist. They are literally trying to cope with the way that the fact that the planet has collapsed. Yeah. And the vast majority of the world is now trying to eat this small group of people. So it's individual stories in that, but the whole story around is how is the world going to cope?
Yeah. I thought it was Walking Dead is actually based on a comic book series as well.
Yes.
And a lot of these are. But and just pulling up the Wikipedia quickly. However, with the collapse of modern civilization, these survivors must confront other human survivors who have formed groups and communities with their own sets of laws and morals, sometimes leading to open, hostile conflict between them. It's not about zombies.
Nope.
The
zombies are just there. It could, like you said, it could have been anything.
Yeah. They're just there as a plot point to be, oh, well, the zombies are going to overrun and everything, so our heroes must move on to the next scenario, basically.
So, we could keep going on for this, but I kind of want to move on to something a little, I want to tangent just a little bit to something similar. So, very quickly, do you have a favourite zombie movie? Because I do.
I have a feeling you're going to say Shaun of the Dead.
Nope. That's good, but it's not.
No, I don't know if I do.
Well, I can recommend one for the listeners as well, if you haven't seen it already. There is one movie that I think does zombies and zombie genre the best since the Night of the Living Dead movies. Mm-hmm. Train to Busan. The South Korean version.
Yes, I remember you talking about this, because aren't they doing a westernized version?
They're doing a Western remake, yes.
Yes.
Which, let's just not approach that subject whatsoever.
Yeah. So we're talking about the original.
Watch the original South Korean movie made in 2016 on a very low budget. It's called Train to Busan, and it is a phenomenal zombie movie. And if you watch it today, it is terrifying.
Yeah.
Because, and this is old news, and it's not really giving much away, but it's a virus.
Yep.
Now, Train to Busan, just watch it. Yep. I'm gonna put a spoiler warning at the beginning of this episode, and I'm also gonna cut right here. Spoiler warning, and we're gonna go into it because Train to Busan, much like The Walking Dead, the zombies are not the point.
Yeah.
It is a story about a group of people on a train doing what it takes to survive. It's about self-sacrifice. It's about the meaning of family. It is one of my favorite zombie movies. I don't like horror movies or zombie movies in general. I just don't. I find them boring. But that movie,
the reason it works so well is because of the cultural influence of it being Korean and kind of the way Koreans things are.
Not to me.
No?
Not to me. It is a very good exploration of South Korean society. It has a lot of, much like Romero's did, it has a lot of commentary on South Korean society that you probably won't get as a Western person. Mm-hmm. Which is why I think part of why they wanted to remake it for a Western audience, but it loses the point. I feel that if you are going to remake Train to Busan, just don't, because there's nothing wrong with the original. While it does have some sociological targeting of South Korean culture, it's all very much like, unless you are South Korean, you're not going to get it. But the overall story and different plot points and arcs in it work just as well no matter where you're from. Family matters to nearly everybody. The value of sacrifice and the value of family and the value of doing what needs to be done to survive, that's not just a culturally South Korean thing. That's, as far as I know, that's a drive for humanity, no matter what it is. And I think that's part of what makes Train to Busan so good. So I highly recommend you watch it. Seek it out. I'm gonna approach Kat again because I really want to talk about it on her show.
Yeah.
Go check out TGIF podcast by Cat's Dead on Twitter.
We'll put a link to that, and also like a link to the Wikipedia for Train to Busan, so that everyone knows how to spell it and things like that as well underneath the poll.
Oh, it'll be in the It'll be in the show notes. Don't worry, I'll have it in the show notes. But yeah, what I wanted to go from that was, as I said, it starts with a virus. Now, we had Night of the Living Dead, which was, imperialism and American exceptionalism for after post-World War II, and the civil rights movement post-World War II. It was very much of its time kind of political snapshot, essentially. Because the movie was taking into account that kind of stuff. Train to Busan was made in 2016. 2016, I believe we were dealing with things like swine flu and...
It was about when SARS first came out, wasn't it?
Bird flu and SARS and all that kind of stuff. We had a lot of those things going on. And how Southeast Asian nations reacted to them. Again, please watch Train to Busan. But now, how do you think zombie movies are going to go forward, given what we've seen under COVID-19?
Well,
now I made the comment a while ago that all our zombie media up to this date has been wrong, because our reactions to COVID-19 have shown that people will fight for their right to get bitten. I made that joke. But going forward, do you think zombie movies will change based on how we have been dealing with this essentially never anticipated before virus, this pandemic?
You say that, and again, this talks into the evolution of zombies, because like I said, you originally had the Haiti and the Bokor, or the witch doctor, and from there you had Hiroshima and Nagasaki happen, and suddenly in popular culture zombies were made by radiation. All the movies and things, you can see them around the time, there's loads of them, and it was all about radiation causing zombies to happen. And then apparently the next big change was, and this was kind of around the Romero era, was at the same time that this was going on, the Korean War. And they were hearing these stories, and it's a horrific thing, but basically the Koreans decided as a tactic is they had loads and loads and loads of peasants. They didn't know how to fight, they weren't really armed, but sheer weight of numbers, they would throw thousands and thousands and thousands of them at American troops to try and overrun positions. Hordes of these crazy, aggressive people with seemingly no care for their own lives. And that kind of fear got folded into the zombie mythos, and suddenly we had the zombie horde. Fast forward to a little bit past then, to the 80s, and we had Ebola, the AIDS epidemic, and a few others.
I see where you're going with this.
And that is when we really had the evolution to the modern day zombie virus. And so as, atomic bombs dropped, and suddenly they were the most terrifying thing, and for a totally unrelated reason, I was actually reading something about the atomic bombs, and the article that I was reading actually had a picture of some firebombed bodies and things, and it was horrific stuff to see, and this was just a blurry old black and white photo. But that was the great fear of the day, and so that got rolled into the zombie myth, because zombies essentially are us except for luck. It's I managed to get away, I ran faster than the other guy, so I didn't get made a zombie. Zombies can be us, but for, as the saying goes, there but for the grace of God. So when suddenly radiation and atomic bombs were the big fear, that was how zombies were created. Then, like I said, we had this kind of viral fear, which, again, we have now, and suddenly the virus. And it wasn't too long after that when Resident Evil came out as a concept with the T-virus, just to throw that in there. But it actually tracks through, and that's why I said the evolution is the evolution of our fear, which is really quite interesting to watch. So where will zombie movies go from here? I'm not sure. Because it's you've got the dichotomy of, you've got the zombies are our fear, but then you've got also the zombies of the analogue for us, and with the political climate going on, with everything that went on with America with the Trump era, and even with now, with all the people denying COVID and the people protesting, World Freedom Day against all the lockdowns and things, both of us on both sides are looking at the others and go, they're basically a horde of mindless idiots. To each of us, we're looking at the other side as they're the zombie horde. So, and I suppose you could broaden that if you want to and say, they're spreading the virus by going around and, doing that. And it's that otherism again, and it's well, if they protest against it, if they don't think they should be injected, well, then they shouldn't be allowed into a hospital and, shouldn't get a respirator if they need one. They should just go and die because they don't think about it. And, I read that and I was like, part of me is kind of like, I can understand that. I'm like, why sit there and say, oh, I don't need to do it, but then I should get the benefit of it. But at the same time, it's like, they're still human beings. They're still us. We shouldn't just be saying, well, because they have different opinions to us, they should die. And once somebody is other, it's easier to dehumanize them. Yes. Which again is a zombie. Well, a zombie's human, but it's also less than a human. So I can see it going both ways. And at the same point, I can see with all this and with zombification kind of as a thing is a loss of autonomy, which a lot of people are feeling, like you said, with the lockdown, with the panics that go on. I can't travel, I can't see people I love, I can't do the things I used to do. Dating. My God, who actually goes on a date anymore? How does that even work nowadays? Does Tinder still exist? Do people still hook up with the fact, do you have to, not just, have you been checked for STIs recently? Have you got a negative COVID test? I honestly don't know how that whole thing works at the moment with, not necessarily where I live because we're quite lucky, but that's a tangent anyway.
I think going on that is it's Tinder is very much okay. It's very much a game of hope, mostly on the side of the dudes. Dudes are just casting out as wide a net as possible, hoping to get their ends wet. They are going to say and do whatever the hell they can. It's just a sad fact of the horrible machismo that is being a man. So it's sadly going to be on the women who are most likely not on Tinder.
Yeah.
And if they are, they're certainly not sleeping with you.
But, and to finally actually get to my answer, I think, like you, I think the zombie stuff at the moment is going to go well because it is that outlet against that fear of being a drone. Even if you are pro-lockdown, pro-wearing all the masks and stuff like that, and I'm pro-doing all kind of things you can to go against it, But again, I haven't had to live through a lockdown for 18 months. So there's a whole different mindset there. You kind of get into a siege mentality, and that's, I don't want to lose my autonomy, my will, because then I am a zombie, So I can see how, and I'm not saying that everyone sits there and has deep psychological introspection every time they go to load up an FPS. It's, but it taps into all those subconscious feelings we all have. And I think that having that outlet at the moment of just being able to watch a movie where the good guys win over, or load up a game where you get to take aim and I quite like the fact that in the new game that we were talking about, Blood for Blood, they're called cleaners. They're cleaning up the infection. You are almost like antibodies, just to put it in that way. But they see like the zombies are a mess that they've got to clean up, and I think there kind of is that feeling around in the world at the moment. So I think it is going to be very popular, but how things will evolve, I think it depends on, like I said, which side. It's the, are the zombies our protagonists or are they antagonists? And I think depending on which way they're going to go depends on very much how we're going to see the future.
So the thing I think about that one is, like, I have been thinking about this for a while, is, like I said, the joke's pretty much been made by a lot of people. But when we talk about historically how these zombies were created, even when it comes to viral agents, it's always been point to point. It's always been a host infects somebody else. It's always been that kind of direct contact, be it a bite or an injection or something.
Mostly, but you wouldn't know about the exception. Yeah.
But COVID is airborne.
Mm-hmm.
And it is very, very infectious. We're talking a 14-day incubation period, so you don't know if you've got it until 14 days after. And in that 14 days, you could have been anywhere spreading it. So it's one of those things where I think zombies in the future could go the way the Dead Rising games have gone, if you've played those.
I haven't. No, give me a brief synopsis.
So Dead Rising, the original Dead Rising was basically Night of the Living Dead in video game form. It was set in a shopping mall. You were Frank West, a news photographer. He's covered wars, there you go, I said the line. Covering the zombie outbreak and how and why it happened. It turns out, spoilers again for over a decade-old game, it was man-made. It was created. It originally came from, I think, a plant or a flower. It's been a while, but essentially the current one was man-made. It was injected into bees or wasps and then transported to the US and spread from there. A single bee got out, stung somebody, and voila, zombie outbreak. But it's one of those things where in the third one, so in the first one you have zombies. No one's really aware of how it works. Zombies just happened and suddenly America and the world was taken over. In the second one, a cure or a vaccine has been made called Zombrex.
Mm-hmm.
If you're infected, you take Zombrex and it staves off becoming a zombie.
Yeah. So
you can live a normal life. It's basically diabetes. That's literally how it appears to be framed in there. Every 24 hours, you have to take your Zombrex or risk dying and becoming a zombie. 24 hours, take your insulin, or I'm not trying to trivialize diabetes, but yeah. So that's a thing. In the third one, the infected get a subdermal patch, a chip that is loaded with Zombrex that is supposed to keep them basically from turning.
Uh-huh.
And the plot of that game is the chip fails.
Yeah.
And there's you got to. Most people say fun zombie game. You dress up silly outfits and you kill lots of zombies. Yes, but underneath that is a growing tone of control, and what happens when that control.
Yeah, you've got a very potent weapon there. All you have to do is, stick one on a plane to a country that you're not happy with, plant them in the middle of a city centre, and deactivate their chip.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, right? How in 3, how it happens is a plane full of people, one of them has the bee in it that stings the pilot, and the plane crashes. And now there are zombies everywhere in this town.
Mm-hmm.
The timelines are all skewed up because there were zombies already there, but then this plane crashes and now there are a lot more zombies. But but basically there's this undercurrent of control. So when I think about how zombie movies and media might go forward, we're talking, are we going to be seeing zombie media coming out now that is going to be people locked up in their homes watching hordes of people just walk past their house? Some of them remnants holding signs saying "My body, my choice," because we've got people out there who are doing that.
No,
still
would kind of be ironic, but yeah.
Well, that's the thing. They are actually out there. There are people using.
I know.
It's bonkers.
Yeah.
But are we going to be seeing that? Like, are we going to be seeing media where somebody coughs and an entire bus empties? We've got this paranoia now where especially down here in Australia where it's winter and nobody can tell the difference between COVID and the common cold.
Yeah.
So that's why everybody covers up if they can and gets the vaccine, all the rest of that stuff. Listen to the masks episode. But
yeah.
We've got people protesting lockdowns.
Yeah, spreading the virus. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got people literally protesting against measures put in place to save their lives. Because that's what these are.
Mm.
Yes, they feel draconian because we are not used to being told to stay inside and stay away from our loved ones. And we hate it. But what would we hate more? Not being able to see them for a couple of weeks? Or being able to see them and then a couple of weeks later you can't see them anymore because they're dead?
Yeah, I was reading something today, and because obviously they've introduced new changes to people leaving and stuff like that, and people are like, my child hasn't seen their grandparents, and I they should be able to be classed as immediate family. It's like, we could go and visit them, but that would put our family at risk. I was like, so you're happy for your parents to come over, who you assume's not going to put anybody at risk, but you're not going to go where they are because you think it's too much of a risk. Like, is that not kind of a dichotomy there?
That's where I was going with this whole that undercurrent of control. Where are we getting to that stage where in future are we going to have the zombie media essentially be the rebellion against not being bitten by zombies? Like, in Dead Rising, they kind of make fun of that. Like, there's an audience that in the second one, there is literally an organization called, I can't remember what they're called, but they're essentially the PETA for zombies.
Yeah.
Like, they are literally, zombies are people too.
Mm.
And the protection from zombies. Because in the second one, it's become such a mundane thing, because that's how humanity works.
Yeah.
It's become such a mundane thing that there are game shows now dedicated to killing zombies. You gather up a whole bunch of zombies into an arena and then drive motorcycles with chainsaws on the handlebars through them, gathering points to win money. That's a game show in Dead Rising. So they have these people as zombies too. PETA for zombies. It's basically satire.
Yeah.
But you think about how people are reacting to something like an airborne virus that can kill in a month.
Yeah.
And is undetectable for half of that time, and you start to wonder if it's not satire anymore.
Mm.
When we go into the future, like I said, are there going to be movies where a zombie outbreak happens for whatever reason, most likely viral, and we're not going to have these people, this group of people escaping from the zombies and trying to find a cure or whatever? We're going to have people trying to.
Yeah, can't evacuate me to here because this is my home. This is where I live, and you can't make me leave.
Yeah, And, we're going to have that homesteading thing, but we're also going to have, like, people who, instead of it being a survival thing, it's like a rebellion thing. People going out and mingling with the zombies and saying there's nothing to worry about, they're our friends. Are we going to have the media change zombies to the point that that's going to be possible? Are we going to have that sympathetic zombified? Because zombies in the past have always been, like you said, the other. The difference from us, something we need to be afraid of and something we need to not become. And then we talk about shows like iZombie and Santa Clarita Diet, and it becomes far less weird that our media going forward may just drastically change zombies as we know them, to the point where zombies now are not something to be feared, but something we should live with. So that's my, I guess, fear for where zombies are going next, because we do. It does feel like, to me, we are at this tipping point.
I think the one thing that would save from that, where you're saying, that everyone's like, zombies are okay and people too and all that, is I don't think. I'll say I don't think. I could be wrong. But as far as I know, I've never heard anyone who says COVID is a hoax. It's not that bad. I should know my ex, insert name of relative, friend, whatever, died from it.
Oh, it's all over Twitter. Don't worry. Those people exist.
Okay, there goes that. And I was going to say, it's, so far removed that they don't see it, that they can't, once it does actually happen in their immediate circle, it kind of does that. And if something's, there and violent, you would hope that...
But there are people out there who have been tested positive, gotten through it, and say it's not that bad.
Yeah, well...
You don't need to worry about anything. My brother, my sister, whatever they caught it, they're fine. Those people are out there.
No, I'm not saying that they get it. I'm saying that they've had it. Trump had it. He had a very mild case. And I'm not saying I was wishing it because I thought he was an awful person. Part of me was hoping I actually hope he gets really sick and struggles with it, because he will then understand and people will see it and go, actually, no. If he was in ICU, if he was on a respirator, he couldn't then say, it's nothing. I had a bit of a fever for a day and I was fine. I don't think somebody can say... I'm not just saying somebody goes through it. Like they said, they had mild and it was fine.
No, that's what I'm saying. There are people out there who have done that. They have said they were in ICU. They were on respirators. They came out of it. They were fine. That it's nothing to worry about. These people exist.
Then I just don't understand.
That's the problem. That is the biggest problem we have with humanity, honestly. But that's why this fear that this is going to happen, that zombie media is going to change to that point, is because those people exist and they fiercely believe it. They fiercely believe that it's nothing to worry about, because honestly, I'll say it now, a lot of them are very right-wing and very religious, and they believe their faith in God.
But see, there's already a militia against the zombie invasion because they can use it to protect their gun rights.
That too.
But yeah, it's actually a thing. I think it was in Kansas. But
that doesn't surprise me.
Going back a minute, you said about no other vectors, and again, this is another spoiler for The Walking Dead. Sorry, it's a season 1 spoiler. Season 1 spoiler. So they find out that season 1 is all about, because it's in the South, going to the CDC in Atlanta, because they're like, they'll know the answer. They'll know how to fix this. They get to the CDC and there's like 2 people left there, and they're like, we're only on backup reserves and all this for so long, so they can't stay there because it's, great bunker type place. Mm-hmm. And the scientist turns around to Rick and says, we're all already infected. And that's the thing with The Walking Dead, is at first they think, if, did you get bitten? Did you get scratched? Because, oh my God, something's going to happen. You're going to die. You're going to turn into a zombie. Then they find out it doesn't matter. that every single one of them, they've never been touched. Whatever it is, whatever caused it, everybody's got it. Once anybody in the world dies, they can die of 80 in their sleep. They're going to come back as a zombie. Because they've all already got it. And that is probably, you know, and again, I'm not a zombie expert, but that is quite a big difference from the variation. Like you said, it's normally something that's passed on from zombie to zombie, not a infection agent or vector that you've already got that will induce it, or even if you get done by it, it will, like you said in that game, it will kill you unless you do something to prevent it. You know, it's just like, I don't know, chickenpox. Anyone who's got chickenpox as a kid, because it's a variant of the herpes virus, you now have, you know, the herpes virus in your system until you die. You know, that's why you get cold sores and things on your mouth. You know, it's that same kind of thing. You've got zombie herpes now, and you're going to die and turn into a zombie. But you've never heard of that before. Yeah, and I think that's part of all of it, because it's then also the kind of nobody's safe, and it's kind of a, you know, what do you do if this person, you know, gets sick? If they're injured, do we try and nurse them back to health, or do we cut out losses because they may come back and kill us? You know, and it adds kind of a different dimension to it. And like I said, maybe something like that, some kind of different transmission form will come in, or maybe something will happen 10 years from now. You know, all these colonies that they're trying to set up on Mars, maybe they'll find a new bacterial life form, and we'll be like, zombies from Mars, you know, will suddenly be the new pop culture thing.
Or it could even just be something as simple as, I mean, this is just an idea that popped into my head now. Much like, you know, it's COVID, or a variant of COVID, or whatever. We're not going to call it COVID or whatever, but it's something that we all get, and it all affects us differently. But when the global temperature hits a certain top, then everything goes to shit. Yeah,
the virus will become active because things do become dormant outside of their general temperature
but
ranges.
We are also dealing with the tipping point of climate change that we are essentially not doing fuck all about.
Yeah, especially in Australia. Congratulations for coming last.
This completely unrelated tangent brought to you by human incompetence in the face of climate extinction.
I guess, really, one, watch Train to Busan. Really watch Train to Busan. Turn your fucking phone off. Get rid of all your distractions. Don't bitch about having to read on the fucking subtitles. Just sit down, shut up, and watch Train to Busan, and watch it again, because it is a phenomenal movie. It is a gut-wrenching, quite touching zombie movie, and you wouldn't expect that, but I hope you will give it a shot. And once you have seen it, you will understand why I personally, and why a lot of people, do not want this Western remake. Do not think it needs to exist.
Yeah, because it's going to be a Michael Bay pop-up book, most likely, isn't it? Because that's how we do it in the West.
Yeah, not necessarily. What I've seen is, apparently they got a Taika Waititi, who apparently does some really good, like, horror stuff.
Okay.
But the thing he does is a lot of gory horror slasher stuff. Which, you know, it doesn't work for Train to Busan. It doesn't. Once you've seen Train to Busan, you'll know it doesn't work. But yeah, watch that and kind of have a bit more, I guess, interest in the foundations of your media. Because as we said at the beginning, our essentially modern day, our knowledge of zombies comes from movies and fiction. But it has its roots in some seriously dark and honestly kind of heartbreaking folklore. And it's somebody's history. It's somebody's reality. It's their family and their ancestors. They lived it.
And not always ancestors. There are, like you said, especially in the south of America, but even in some places, you know, My mother was born in West Africa, and there was a tribal shaman at her birth because her father was a doctor for the army over there, and he worked with all the local tribes. And, you know, they still hold a lot of power. They still do.
Oh yeah, no,
you know,
it still exists. Like
absolutely.
we don't hear about it because of, obviously, the pop culture has kind of massacred it, but I don't doubt there are still people out there who are fervent believers in the original African voodoo.
Absolutely.
Because it is still for them, a very relevant religion. It was a religion.
Yeah.
Voodoo was an African religion. So, you know, it's essentially like The Exorcist, you know, but we don't have, like, Catholicism and Christianity doesn't really have that dark side to it in terms of it was born out of slaves who...
You do know the story of Moses, right?
Slaves committed suicide and couldn't go to heaven, basically.
Yeah.
And so their bodies wandered the earth as shambling corpses with no soul. I'm sorry, if you commit suicide as a Catholic or a Christian, I don't know much about it, but from the last I heard, your body doesn't get up and walk around. Your soul just doesn't go to heaven.
Doesn't haunt your grave area or lurk around there. No, it does not.
It doesn't go to heaven. It goes to hell, most likely. You know, that's different. To them, when they were a slave, their only hold and grip on their life was literally to take it away from their master, and but by doing so, give up their place in the eternal sunlight of Africa. That's some shocking shit, and look what we have done to it. As entertaining as it may be, and granted it is entertaining.
Yeah, it is unrecognizable from the roots of what it was.
Yeah, it is still worth having some insight into where it came from. Try and think about what your culture may be stepping on, and have some respect for it, I guess I should say.
On that topic, I should say, I have mentioned some very early movies. I just want to put a warning out there. I don't know if they're available for consumption anymore. I saw a picture of one, and it did appear like they'd used actors in blackface to represent
zombies. That's a thing. That's a thing that was happening a lot, especially in the 30s and 40s.
Yeah, but I just don't want anyone to go looking for the very early movies. I can't say from anyone in particular. It just named two characters. I can't even remember which one I saw it on. But do be aware of that, because I know some people find it really offensive, and I'd hate for somebody to say, you know, I have an interest in zombies. I'd, you know, check out some of the history and stuff like that. So just be aware that if you do go looking, there is that.
Well, that's a factor we've got to be wary of as well, but it also ties into that too, especially like you think about, again, zombies etc. came from Haitian voodoo. Haitian voodoo came from Africa. The slaves from Africa, they were black, and having white people playing zombies in blackface is just the epitome of everything that is wrong with how we have treated that kind of aspect to that genre.
They popularized a zombie cocktail in the 1930s, and they said you can only have two because any more than that might make your brain dead. And one of the ingredients in it was sugarcane, which was still being harvested by slaves, which the zombie mythos came from. And again, it wasn't something that was in the public consciousness at the time, but it just blows our mind to look back on it now. And I'm not apologising for it, but it's just,
but that's it. It's still not now, which is why I wanted to make this episode, because there's so much more to it that you would be shocked to know about, especially us as white folks. Like, I'm sure this whole episode has been basically nothing new to people of colour. You know, this is all nothing of new. Like, this is stuff they just knew about. Like, our culture has been systematically
Butchered.
systematically butchered for the entertainment of white people.
Yeah. And I have, friends who are on the, I love zombies, I know everything about zombies, I go into a place and I'm like, if the zombie apocalypse happened right now, what would my escape route be? Quite literally, I've had that conversation. It was actually in a bar called The Murderers when we had a crossbow behind us, so that was kind of an easy fix. But just odd segue there. But none of them knew about this kind of root of the zombie myth. The legend, I suppose. I'm not really sure what you call it because, like I said, they had people who were physically zombified as far as they thought by, psychological conditioning and drugs. So I'm not even sure if myth is really the right word to use. Phenomenon?
No, I mean, phenomenon is probably an accurate one, like especially with the fugu dust and the datura powder drugs, those two things. But yeah, like there are like verifiable, like people have gone out and verified these historical examples of what people would consider zombies. Like I wanted to mention earlier, but like in 1997, the British medical journal The Lancet published 3 verifiable accounts, including one case where a Haitian woman was buried and 3 years later came back. When they investigated, her grave was full of stones.
Crazy.
Like, after that, her parents took her to the hospital to be examined. Like, she, essentially, to them, she came back from the dead. And this is in a British medical journal. I didn't find that article. I probably should have, but, I was running short on time. It was just, we're talking about a genre that has a far greater, deeper, and more painful history than I think nearly 99% of its fans even know about.
Yeah. They say truth is stranger than fiction. It's certainly, in a way, I think, a lot more fascinating and a lot more faceted than fiction.
Yeah. That was why I wanted to do this episode. Even though it got 6 votes, even though it didn't do as well as nearly any of our other polls, I wanted to do this episode because it was important. Not just for zombie movies, but any media we consume, we should be more aware of where and how it came to be.
Yeah.
Because it's important. And you might learn something.
I certainly did. It was fascinating to learn about the history and also to learn, as its evolution, the effects on our psychology and how that's impacted it. But like you said, learning about other cultures and things, it's something I didn't think I was going to come across.
And it's just a matter of understanding that this thing that you love, and you're allowed to love it, no one's telling you can't, it was built off the backs of something terrible. And we kind of need to acknowledge that, even as we love it. Like I said, Train to Busan is my favourite zombie film. And now I know that it is using something from... It itself is using something from a different culture. So it's... In a way, it's gone from a niche occult mythology, folklore, whatever you want to call it, to a global phenomenon that looks nothing like its origins. Because it's gone through so many different filters.
And it's really been shaped by pop culture.
Yeah. And it has shaped and been shaped like a lot of pop culture is. To my mind, it is still so super, super important to be aware of where these things came from. And more importantly, at least to me, it's kind of enhanced my enjoyment.
I think you can, knowing the history and the roots or something, like you said, you can kind of appreciate that depth. And for people who, a lot of times you find hidden nods to things that you just would completely miss otherwise. Exactly,
because you would know, going back, I might watch a couple more zombie movies and see if, the directors knew this stuff. Because surely they might. Maybe Romero did, and we didn't notice that.
Yeah, I'm interested to watch both Romero movies just as a commentary on society, really, for the times.
Yeah. And they still kind of hold up, especially 2. let's be honest, consumerism hasn't changed much.
Well, especially one, I'd think really with everything that's gone on and
I think, as I said, I think it's worth just going into that. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. You know, this has been a long episode, but we covered a lot of stuff.
It has, for something that I thought when you showed me the poll was going to be a very light, fluffy topic. Was something with a lot of hidden depth, and I'm actually really, really glad we did this.
Yeah, that's how I originally pictured it. Like, I put that up as a fun fluff piece. You know, something fun. And no, it was not. And I'm all the more enlightened for it, and I'm glad I did it, because I learned so much, and it has really opened my eyes up to something that, you know, most people likely don't know.
And we would love to hear from you guys, whether you knew about this or didn't, and if it's changed kind of your views in any way, either from my poll or if you didn't vote, or just views in general on how you feel about, you know, the zombie movies and stuff. Have you been a fan? Have you not been a fan and think you're going to, you know, have a watch now and have a bit of a think about things and look into it a bit deeper, or... You know,
absolutely, yeah. Let us know. Get involved, like, because I'm definitely going to watch Train to Busan again. I don't know how many times I can mention that movie, but seriously, it's such a good movie. You wouldn't expect it for a zombie movie. You just wouldn't. But yeah, think about where it came from, and yeah, let us know. What's your favorite zombie movie? Do you have one? Why is it your favorite? And did you know the history of zombies as a genre and in folklore? Also, you know, do you have any recommendations for movies that maybe explore that fact? You know, I'm sure there's a lot more out of that. Like, we're seeing this renaissance in cinema lately, where, you know, things like Jordan Peele's Get Out, which is literally an examination of white horror versus black horror. You know, it's you know, the whole, you know, a white woman and a black man visit a white man, her parents. And, you know, it's a horror movie told from a black person's perspective of what they find horrifying. So, you know, it's one of those things where there's a lot of different approaches and aspects to it that have kind of opened my eyes to horror being, and horror fans know this already, they're already rolling their eyes at what I'm about to say, but there's more aspects to horror than just blood, gore, and screaming.
Yeah, slasher is a very narrow thing, and that's kind of just a shock value. And as you know, we've become so...
It's also really the only one we are kind of exposed to as much as we are. Every big budget blockbuster horror movie is a slasher.
Yeah, and it's just more and more, because it's easier to try and shock, but you get that fatigue from it, and it gets more and more extreme to try and provoke that reaction. Like, I know I watched some of the Saw movies, and it kind of got to a point where I'm just like, it's not even...
The first one is the only good one in that franchise. It just is.
I just...
Because it's the only good one.
I don't remember which one it was, and I think I just watched it because it was on TV or something. But there was a point, and there was a woman, and there was basically like a swimming pool type thing.
Yep,
or like a
that's
big
the second one. It's full of used syringes. Yep.
Yes.
Yep, that's the second one.
And
that's where it started to go downhill.
There's just something repugnant about it at that phase, and I was just like, no.
Yeah, that era of horror movies, where we had things like Hostel and Wolf Creek and all that kind of stuff, it's gore and torture porn, and it's not. That's what turns me off horror. You know, I'm sorry, horror fans. I know you love it, but it's just one of those things where it's like, I don't understand how you can essentially take pleasure in this. I just don't.
No, it just seems going for cheap shock value of a jaded audience. And
yeah, I think they're correct. It is just being jaded. We're inured to everything. Stuff doesn't get to us anymore.
You know, we see so many shocking things by a click on the internet. these days, you know, and we see so much younger, and I'm not getting into internet censorship or whether that's a good or a bad thing, but it does make us more jaded, and it does take more to shock us, and yeah. But anyway, that's another episode.
Oh yeah, we might get into that. I might look some more into that and approach again Kat from TGIF podcast.
Yeah, we can do like our own comic book universe crossover.
Maybe, I don't know, but yeah, we'll get her in to talk more about horror as a genre and probably why it appeals to so many people. Because again, I don't do so well with horror. I find jump scares annoying, and I find slasher movies boring. Yeah. But there's more to it than that, and we should get an expert on to talk about that. But other than that, where can people find you?
Where they can always find me. Of course, I am not so much, but I'm going to keep shouting it out because I try and get on there when I can on Twitch, as well as, of course, on Twitter at Analog Gaming. That's with 2 N's because it's a pun. Is anybody surprised?
And she loves her puns. Yes. As I said at the top of the episode, my handle has changed. You can find me at Mercurial Jester. That's MERCURIALJESTR, because somebody else took that name on Twitter, and I'm really mad about it.
There's always joyful pessimist. I described you as one of those today, and
sounds about right.
I was like, I like that for you.
Otherwise known as a pragmatist, but sure.
So, that could be your new blog title, The Joyful Pessimist.
But yeah, you can find me there. You can find me the same very soon on Twitch, but that's at Mercurial Jester, all spelled out with an underscore at the end. All this stuff will be in the podcast notes and on the Twitter itself. But yeah, keep an eye out for the next poll. I think the next poll, unless you have any doubts, may in fact be horror related, because I would like to get Kat on as soon as possible. She's very busy, but you know, if we could find an opening, that'd be great.
Absolutely. And even if you're not a fan of horror, as we've found, the lore and world building of horror can still be quite an intriguing subject, even if you're not a fan of watching horror movies. So don't be put off or by my cat trying to do his own jump scare. You know, we're not going to be talking about lots of gross stuff, hopefully. But yes, we will see you on the polls, and we will see you in the podcast soon.
Next time. Peace, everyone.